Good afternoon, everyone. It is wonderful to be among such distinguished gathering today. I am Bhuvaneshwaran Pandian from PGPM class of 2023. I'll be your host for today's Consulting Conclave. Before I begin, I request the audience, please put your devices on silent mode. For those who might be joining us for the first time, we are leading B School in India. For over 40 years, SPJMR has blazed a distinct trail in management education in India, combining a unique mix of social sensitivity, teaching excellence, industry connectivity, and community engagement. Our PGPM batch is dynamic. We have experienced professionals from diverse backgrounds such as gaming, public sector banks, pharmaceuticals, and merchant navy. And I've always believed in pushing the boundaries of conventional thinking. Today's event is yet another testament to that spirit. Welcome to Samavesh. At its core, Samavesh epitomizes the amalgamation of brilliant minds discussing pertinent themes. This year, we delve into the compelling realm of green consulting, a sector that encompasses both sustainability and consultation, as businesses, organizations, and governments continually align their missions with environmental goals. Green consulting emerges as a pivotal enabler. There is a famous saying, we have not inherited this earth from our forefathers, but we have borrowed it from our children. So, for our children, let us weave a fabric of circular economy with sustainable practices, responsible leadership, innovation, and environmental compliance. And to speak on the issues, let me introduce our speakers for the day. Mr. Sudipta Ghosh. He is a seasoned professional with over 24 years of consulting experience in the field of data analytics. He currently serves as data analytics leader at PwC India, where he is responsible for defining the product solution strategy, go-to-market initiatives. He previously worked with IBM Global Services. Our next speaker is Meghna Srimali. She is an accomplished strategy consultant with over 20 years of experience, currently serving as an associate partner in consulting at IBM. Prior to a role at IBM, she dedicated over 17 years with EY, where she held the position of director responsible for leading business development and delivery for agriculture and other development sector projects with various governments across the globe. Next, I would like to call upon Mr. Aditya Kandla. He is a seasoned professional with over 14 years of experience in sales, including more than 3 years in ESG focused solutions. Currently, he is the director of sales and client engagement at ESG Data and Solutions. He has varied experience working with Directee Group, HCL Technologies, and S&P Global. And our next speaker is Mr. Sankar Chakrabarti. He is a seasoned professional with more than 20 years of experience across credit ratings and risk assessment. He is currently working with Equity Ratings and Research Limited as MD and CEO. He is currently holding Equity Ratings position, and previously he worked with Indian Oil Corporation Limited, CRISIL Limited, CMIE, and Capital Market. To steer the ship, I would pleased to introduce our moderator, Professor Neelendra Singh Pawar. He is a core faculty member of Operations, Supply Chain Management, and Quantitative Methods. He is also the chairperson of PGPM. He has around 20 years of industry experience before joining academics in 2016. During his professional engagement with the consumer goods and retail industry, he served in senior executive roles, managing portfolios such as planning, new business initiatives, logistics, supply chain and logistics, manufacturing, and service operations. His research interests cover supply chain planning, logistics, and e-commerce. Along with our esteemed panelists, we also have amidst us our Dean, Dr. Varun Nagaraj, and our Deputy Program Chairperson, Professor Arindam Das. Now I would like to invite Mr. Nitesh Mehrotra on the stage. He's the EY India Partner for Sustainability and ESG, specializing in ESG governance framework, ESG maturity and benchmarking across business models and value chains. With over 20 years of experience, he has been influential in the end-to-end project management, driving profitable growth and opportunities focused on ESG. I would also like to welcome Ms. Surbhi Begwani, Senior Manager at EY. With a keen eye on the interplay between sustainability and the business world, our speakers' vast experience promise to elevate our discussions to newer heights. Let's put our hands together for our moderator and speakers for today. Now, I would like to hand over the mic to Professor Neelendra Singh Pawar. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. First of all, am I audible? Yeah, I'm finding it a bit difficult to manage. Okay, great. So, welcome everybody. And Nitish, my name is Neelendra. I teach in the area of operations and supply chain. And I'll be moderating the panel. Okay. Just to fill you in, around 65% of our batch every year gets into consulting. Okay, it's a very consulting-heavy batch, more by default than any particular design. And interesting thing is, we teach them, they go into digital transformation, cost reduction, process consulting, risk advisory, even cyber risk and things. And we have structured courses for them. But sustainability, especially as a consulting or transformation area, probably hasn't received as much focus. May or not be from us, probably from other campuses as well. So with that light, I think we are looking forward to towards the conversation to ignite some thoughts, and probably if we can restructure the way we learn to include some of these aspects here as well. Great. So to start with, I think I'll probably put the first question to Nitish himself. So when you talk about consulting in the sustainability space, so what kind of projects does it involve? Are they, let's say, basic auditing work or some problem solving, or even at a strategic level? So what are the kind of assignments you end up doing with your clients?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. So I know sustainability as a domain, while it's very old, it's very new also, right? From a consulting standpoint, since that is your main question, I think the way to look at it is the way we look at it in a professional services firm on financial reporting, right? So what does an organization do, right? Obviously, you are supposed to be auditing the data, right? So there is assurance that we bring, and the trust in sustainability is a very, very important element. So I think that's at the core of it, right? And if we were to see as any professional services firm, what they bring to the table is trust and credibility. And I think in sustainability, and we will talk a little bit as we go along, this trust is a major issue, right? This concept of greenwashing, as some of you may have started to hear, what is sustainable, what is ethical, what is responsible. This itself is a big debate, and the standards are evolving. And I think that's where a leading firm has a role to play to define those standards, and then obviously to build trust and credibility to the standards. So I think that's one. But that's just the basic part of it. I think the biggest thing that our clients or any industry is asking us is that, what does sustainability mean to us, to a business model? And today, I don't know any business model, whether you are in manufacturing, you're in service, you're in IT, and we'll talk about it, whether in financial services, you are not impacted and disrupted by sustainability, right? And which has both to protect value as well as to create value, right? Because every leading organization now needs to reframe their strategy from a sustainability standpoint. So I think, and that's the major part of it, that helping the businesses, the function understand what this is, and then how do they steer to minimize the risk and to maximize the opportunity. And so in a nutshell, that's what it is, right? So, and as you look at the dependency, whether it's systems, whether it's data, whether it's processes, whether it's tax, everything, I think it's impacted. I don't know any function and anywhere all of you will go which will not be impacted by sustainability. So that's I would say in nutshell. And I think I'm sure we'll unpack more as we go along.
Yeah, thanks. Sudipto and Meghna, I think similar thoughts for your firms. Do you also handle sustainability at a strategy level? Could be for, let's say, manufacturing strategy or or it's essentially auditing the processes and data? So what kind of assignments would you guys end up doing in this?
So thank you very much for this opportunity. Hope you are able to hear me now. Yeah, now it's come. So thank you very much for inviting me and on this topic, which is very, very topical, I must say. In terms of what we do, I would say that there are essentially 2-3 categories of projects or works which we do. The first thing, as you rightly pointed out, is about the strategy. Now, strategy is a very all-encompassing word, but from an ESG perspective, when I say strategy, what do I mean by that? What I effectively mean by that is that if an organization says that I want to declare a net zero goal by 2035 or 2040, what is the strategy I have in place to ensure that that goal is achieved, right? If I have taken targets of GHG, which is greenhouse gases emissions reduction, by a certain percentage, first of all, what is that certain percentage I should be doing, and then how am I going to even achieve that? Why it is strategies? Because it is not a single year journey, it is a multi-decade journey. So you need to have something which you can do immediately, something which you can do in the medium term, and something which you definitely need to have an eye for the long term. That is where the strategy comes into being. The other aspect of strategy is that there are many choices which an organization has to make. For example, if I am in a very carbon intensive industry like a textile industry or a cement industry or a steel industry, I can think of completely changing my conversion process, making it more digital, making it more automated, replacing my sources of energy with from conventional to non-conventional sources which are more green in nature, right? And for doing that, it requires a huge amount of capex investment. It requires a complete transfer of technology or change of technology, and it also requires you to evaluate the financial matrices of how your organization is going to cope with that huge amount of investment which you're planning to do, and that requires a strategy of its own, right? The third aspect of the strategy is that once you have sorted what are your goals and what kind of transition path you're going to go ahead with, the third aspect will be the measurement of the same on a yearly and quarterly or a monthly basis so that you stay true to it. And there lies in the use of technology in a very big way to even capture the data of your carbon emissions, to even capture the sources of all different types of scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions, so that you are not just capturing, but you're also disclosing the data in a correct, as my colleague said, in a trustable, in a trustworthy manner. And that becomes the third aspect of the ESG project or the assignment. So multiple facets,
Yeah.
and very, very exciting space to be in.
Thanks. Wait.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Okay. So I am not an ESG consultant or a sustainability consultant. I keep telling the organizing team that I think you just flipped a coin and got me here. So I've been working with the public sector, government and public sector, and I was just speaking with Professor and the rest of the co-panelists, and I was talking about. We keep talking about ESG and sustainability from a very private sector lens, firms, which is huge, which is important, absolutely critical. But I think the side of the story that gets missed sometimes is also the public sector, the government's role in it. And I don't even mean from a policy or an auditing perspective. So India has 2,700 kilometers of, Nitesh and I were on the flight together, and I keep joking to everyone that आधा panel discussion हम लोग का flight पे ही हो गया था. So India has 2,700 kilometers of coastline, and fisher folk over decades and centuries, Indian fisher folk, have been using techniques, fishing techniques, which after a while, when the net gets dissolved in the saline water, after a while it starts eroding the sandbank. And the government is taking very specific steps to make them aware that what you're doing is eventually going to start affecting your own livelihoods. So that's another perspective that we come across quite a bit. We don't, because I think all the focus is on Nitesh and Sudipta's work from a private sector perspective.
Hey, thanks so much. Now, coming from the improving sustainability or such practices in businesses to ratings. So it's something I wanted to ask Shankar. So when you talk about ESG ratings for businesses or for sectors, so what do we exactly mean by them? And when you say E, S, and G, how do you rate them? Is there a process? And are there various ratings available? Are they comparable? So if you can introduce us to that.
Okay. Thank you so much for inviting. And let me try and capture the essence of it in short. However, it's a fairly, there could be a nice course for about 2 or 3 days on the entire topic. So I will try to tell you a story, how we started and what happened, the backstory of our experience. So you would remember, since you are students of management, you must have already done some case studies on ILFS and DHFL, right? So investors lost few lakh crores because of these two failures. And as a student of ratings who has spent more than 27 years, I started facing a lot of questions, though I had nothing to do with ILFS and DHFL per se. But I started facing a lot of questions, what is this use for credit ratings? Ye bekar hai. Nobody can really predict and so on. So as a student of ratings, we could not just ignore the fact that this was indeed a failure of the credit rating industry. So then the question is that how do we improve this? How are we going to be able to predict the next several breakdowns that are going to happen? So we started a small group, and this is about 5 years back, before the pandemic. And we listed down a list of things which can go wrong. So governance, we knew we are credit rating agency, so we are aware about the governance failures. We have seen from Amtech Auto, Rico, Sun Pharma, n number of cases are there where governance failure has caused a havoc, and we knew about it. But what if there are other things other than governance? So we looked at India, and very importantly, what Meghna mentioned is the long coastline makes us extremely vulnerable in terms of climate, because the salt water can come into the mainland, and we are very, very agrarian. Our dependence on agriculture is very high. Population density in those coastal areas is extremely high. So, one thing leads to another, and then, you have internal migration, and food security is impacted and all that. So we listed down a list of things which can go wrong. And in those days, we were not calling it ESG internally, but as we go along, as we went along, we realized that we are talking about ESG, right? So then the question was, what do we do? I went to about 15 banks, about 5-6 mutual funds, and we told them that, look, this is there is a we need to measure these risks, and we need to look at the opportunities. We need to see which companies are going to be able to mitigate these risks and take the opportunities on. Everybody actually discouraged us. They said that, Indian companies are notorious. They don't share data. Their data is not trustworthy, and so on. And when we came back, initially we were upset. Literally, I was depressed after going through these meetings. But then somebody told me that, if Mr. Steve Jobs would have gone and asked a Nokia user, do you need a iPhone? Nobody would have, in those days, nobody would have said that he requires an iPhone. So sometimes if you want to do something, you have to have this conviction that this is needed. So we started. Then the next stage was to collect data, and on my right side we have Aditya. Aditya works for a company called ESGDS. They were also grappling with certain things, and I actually became their seed customer. I'm their first customer to buy data. So we started collecting data, and then we realized that actually it's not like data is not there. 60% of the companies were disclosing 70% 65 to 70% of the disclosures that were required under
Shikhar,
BRR.
what kind of data? Because we are not very familiar with this space. So what kind of data were you collecting?
So, say for example, if I look at the social side of it, we are looking at data security. We are looking at CEO's compensation, board compensation. We are looking at board diversity, diversity in the workforce. We are looking at child labor. So in total, and then on the E is spoken about in the public domain more often. So you already probably know that there are emissions, there is water, and so on. So in total, we have identified about 1,045 indicators which we track for about 1,100 top Indian companies. So this is the backstory. Now the question that you asked me is, what is rating ESG ratings? Now this is where it is very interesting. The rating is meant for investors. If you are investing in a company, you would like to know whether your investment is safe or not, right? So rating essentially means that. When we conduct a credit rating exercise, we essentially rely on financial numbers and projections. Now, when you want to project financials, you can project up to 2 years. In these days, somebody like me will argue that even 2 quarters is difficult because things are so dynamic. But for argument's sake, we can say that probably 3 to 5 years is something you can project. You probably have some view about how regulatory risks will change, how demand supply will change, how competition will change, and therefore 3 to 5 years is something that is visible. Beyond that, it is actually nebulous. Now, this is exactly where ESG rating comes in. ESG rating is meant for the investors to figure out whether his investee company will be able to mitigate and manage the risks that are going to pan out in the area of E, S, and G in the very long term, which is essentially beyond 5 years, maybe up to 15 years or 20 years. So people who are familiar with the concept of value investing, you would probably understand that, there has to be a model to figure out. So ESG rating does not tell you what your profit will be, but it tells you whether this company is more likely to be able to survive compared to its peers. So if you look at, say, for example, Godfrey Phillips and ITC, ignore the fact that their product is a sin product. But between these two companies, if you want to understand where my money will be safe in the long run, you probably look at ESG factors. And then you say that this company is able to showcase that they have a track record of mitigating the risks. They have internal policies and processes. They have past track record of performance, and they are also working on the opportunities. So, therefore, company X is better placed than company Y in managing a failure which may come because of these factors. One last thing I would like to say here is that I have given the example of ITC, and you must be wondering why ITC is rated in ESG, and if at all, why they are rated well. Now here, as a rating agency, we are not trying to be judgmental about the processes. Our job is to inform the investors whether this company is doing enough to survive or not. Our job is not to measure the impact of their products on the society and the people and all that. So it's not about judging whether a company is a pious company or it's a sinner or not. It is merely to measure the company's ability to mitigate the risks. There are other kind of rating products which are possible. One of that can be called impact rating. And when you talk about impact rating, you really look at the product and its impact on the society and environment and so on and so forth.
True.
So sorry for taking probably too
I think
long.
it makes things very clear. And you were sourcing data from Aditya's company, as you mentioned.
Aditya is our data source.
Okay, so I'm just curious how easy it is to get data across such wide parameters, and I think you mentioned more than 1,000 indicators you observe, and how reliable is the data? And the reason I ask is because many of the companies may not have internal mechanisms to capture it themselves. So what are the challenges you face in that?
Yeah, so as Sankar mentioned, it was not that easy, but it is becoming easier and easier.
Okay.
And as he said, even about 4 years back, there were companies reporting 65% of the data that we look at now. And so when we look at data, it has to. It's not just about data. It's about what purpose it serves as well, right? So what your, for example, Shankar mentioned that 1,045 data points go into rating, ESG rating, right? But when you're looking at certain compliance standards, like something a consultant might look at, it might be even more. It might be close to 1,400 data points as well, depending on, there are various taxonomies as well. So there's TCFD, there's UNPRI, and so on. So these taxonomies, based on what taxonomy you're following, the kind of data you're looking at and the number of data points you're looking at changes as well. Again, based on the industry, it might change. So, for example, Dipto spoke about the manufacturing industry. That industry will require more focus towards the E, the environmental data. So you might have close to 300 data points just on the environment for that sector. But when you're looking at a financial services sector, there's very less that will impact the environment as such. But then you focus more on the S and the G. Is your gender ratio good? Are your policies in terms of POSH committee and so on, are they good? Do you have a crash in your premises and so on? So these kind of policies will matter more than what are your emissions and are you polluting water? Are you recycling water in your office and so on? So the impact, so it's called materiality. So what is material to that sector or that company will matter more. So as far as the data is concerned, when it comes to a listed company, it has become enough right now. So there is enough data for someone to pick up an annual report and do research. But now, to what depth in terms of how many companies reported is different, because if a smaller company might not have, as you said, the resources or the need to report based on their capacity. But when it comes to unlisted companies, that is where the challenge lies, because they don't have to report it. No one is forcing them to report it. The Ministry of MFA is not asking them. The SEBI is not going to ask them as well. So that is where the challenge lies: getting this data from companies which are not listed, which are private, which are small SMEs, and so on. Why that matters is because when you're looking at an SBI, you want to know if SBI is doing well in its operations as far as ESG is concerned. But then you also have to look at what their loan book is like, right? Because they have thousands of companies that they lend money to, and most of them would be SMEs, right? It's an 80-20 thing. Number would be larger towards SMEs, but it might impact the loan book less. But at the same time, SBI needs to look at that data as well. Is their portfolio or is their loan book ESG compliant? And what tolerance are you looking at? And so on. So RBI is working on that as well. As SEBI is concerned more about the corporate level ESG factors, but RBI is looking at is your are your assets kind of ESG compliant and so on. As far as the reliability is concerned, it is getting there, I would say, but there are certain measures that are being taken by SEBI and by regulators as well. So for example, from next year onwards, there will be companies who will be asked to assure their data. So a third-party consultant or a third-party firm will have to go in, look at their report, BRSR report or their ESG report, and then verify if what they're saying is correct or not.
True.
And then, just like a financial statement is audited, similarly the ESG statement or BRSR report or ESG report will have to be audited. So that will start from next year as well. So we are working, I think, even though a lot of these things, India is still kind of getting to terms with compared to the developed markets. But I think in developing world, India is still working hard and in forefront of at least putting down these regulations.
Right.
Now, how far they are taken forward and how seriously they are adhered to and who is held accountable, that will eventually decide, what the longevity of it.
Yeah, thanks. So interesting you mentioned that you're collecting data from probably listed companies. It's fairly easily available. But if you look at the problem at probably a national level, the sheer width of data would be very high. So if you look at multiple listed companies as and across sectors, and you might need to aggregate them at a sector level as well. So I just want to get Sudipto's views on the application of the analytical tools. And you run a vertical which looks at data analytics, ML, and so on and so forth. And you mentioned you do provide these services to the sustainability wing. So how does one apply the analytical techniques or machine learning, other things, onto the data coming for sustainability related projects?
Yeah, so the starting point, as you rightly said, is the ability to capture the data at source. Now, usually what happens is that a lot of reporting which happens, the data is manually entered in Excel spreadsheets. And then it is used to kind of aggregate, and then you do the disclosures and the reporting. However, that is going to change in the future because take, for example, something which you are producing in a shop floor or in the factory. If you are able to have the data about the emission coming directly from a sensor, that is a far more reliable way to capture at least the scope 1 emission, which is considered as the easiest part. But I'll tell you why it is not the easiest, or it is also actually quite difficult. All of you have studied chemistry, so you know the chemical equations. You know that if you have to manufacture cement, I mean, I'm taking cement as an example because that's the easiest to understand. You will have limestone and other things, and that gets converted to cement, and there is a chemical reaction which happens. Now, depending on how many molecules of raw material you need, you know how many molecules of CO2 it is going to emit just on the basis of the chemical reaction. So one way to capture the scope 1, and I hope that all of you understand the scope 1, 2, 3. If not, then I can explain that. But I'm assuming that you understand what is scope 1, which is the emission which you are emitting from your conversion process. You can actually calculate by assuming how much of raw material you are consuming. And hence, you can say that, well, this is what is going to be my CO2 emission based on the chemical reaction. That is one methodology of calculating your scope 1 emission. However, the other methodology could be that you are actually keeping a sensor and measuring how much of CO2 is getting emitted. And you're not depending on any chemical formula or a rule or a business rule, as we call it, but you are directly capturing how much of emission is going out from the chimneys or from the pipe. Now these two data points can be quite different. And that is where lies in the complexity, because as an organization, the starting point is to have a commonality of definitions of what is the definition of your CO2 emission in that manufacturing process context. Now, that means that you need to have, if I can get a little more technical, you need to have a defined business metadata of the data. So that's the starting point. To arrive at a common set of definitions which you agree in the organization, which is also in line with the global best practices and all that. And then you say that, well, there is nothing right or wrong, because it doesn't matter. I mean, one thing I would like to also call out is that the absolute value of emission does not matter as long as you're capturing it in a consistent way and you're showing a downward trend. So it doesn't really matter. I mean, you can really split here and go very, very in depth into a lot of definitional issue. But as long as you are broadly in the range, more than the absolute accuracy of that definition, it is important the consistency of how that definition gets applied over a period of time, right? So that is the starting point. The second thing is that the lineage of the data is very important from a data perspective, which means that suppose in my BRSR reporting, which is now the SEBI norm, and the listed companies, they have to publish the data as part of their annual disclosures. If somebody questions what is the rationale of that data, or what is the veracity of that data, as an organization, you need to have a complete traceability of data all the way to the source of the data. Now that traceability will get lost if there is a lot of manual feed or manual intervention which is happening, which is why you need that end-to-end visibility of the chain of how the data is coming from, right? The second aspect. Um, uh, if you have and that is what we call as the technical metadata. So I talked about the business metadata, I talked about the technical metadata, which is a lineage, and then I talked about the overall definition. Once you have sorted that out, then the question is that what kind of basic reporting you are doing. To start with, you will do a basic reporting, which means that you will say, these are my matrices, these are my different plants, these are my different processes, these are my different geographies, and I am able to figure out how much is going to be simply my emission data. I'm keeping it simple because ESG is not just about emission. It is also about circularity. It is also about the social aspect, which we heard about. But if I just take one sliver, which is just the environment aspect of it, because it's easy to understand, even then you can see there is a huge amount of complexity which comes in any organization. So you talk about the basic reporting. Basic reporting which comes after you have identified what is the business and the technical metadata. Now, basic reporting is also not enough because it's just reporting. It's okay from a compliance perspective, but it is not going to give you a huge amount of visibility that what is it that you are going to do next, right? Now, most organizations unfortunately treat it as a compliance burden. There are some organizations who do not treat the ESG disclosure as a compliance burden, that use it as an opportunity. Use it as an opportunity to tell the outside world that they are doing the right things. Use this as an opportunity to drive cheaper sources of financing for some of their capex investments, right? They also find it a way by which they can differentiate themselves in the market and say that my product is green. For example, we are talking about a green steel, or we are talking about a green cement, and all of that, right? I mean, all these terminologies effectively mean that you are saying that I am being more environmentally responsible. My products have a less carbon footprint, and hence they are superior than my competition. And you are going to charge a premium for that as well. It also means that you are going to attract the right talent. I mean, when you guys go, you will not go to an organization who do not use sustainability in the right spirit. So even for an organization to attract the right kind of talent, you also have to demonstrate that you're serious and doing something about it. So all these aspects become important. And if you're looking at all these aspects, then just a simple reporting is not enough. Then what you need to do is that you need to look at scenarios. You need to look at forward-looking planning. You need to look at different events which can happen, and that can kind of change the course of your action. And there you are going into the realm of non-financial planning. Every organization does financial planning, by the way, right? You have a budgeting exercise, which is usually an annual exercise, but you also have rolling forecasts. But they only use the financial matrices. They will look at revenues, the costs, and all of that, right? We are saying that beyond just the revenue and cost, now you're also looking at emission or other ESG parameters, which are non-financial parameters, as part of your planning process. Why planning process is important? Because until and unless you have got targets for those 9 non-financial parameters on a year-by-year basis, you are never going to achieve your net zero goals or even your GHG goals, right? So reporting is the starting point, but then very quickly it gets into forecasting and planning and what-if analysis, right? Now that is what you're doing from an organization perspective. Now I come to the broader thing. What do you need to do from an overall industry perspective? Suppose I'm outside of the organization, then what I can do is that, because there are multiple standards and there are different standards which are available there, and most of the organizations have to comply to one or more standards, and some of these standards don't also reconcile with each other, so there is a bit of a challenge also. But assume that you have got a standard and you are reporting to those standards, then it is possible for somebody who is not in that organization but outside that organization to look at all the peer groups within that sector, right? Look at all the organizations in that function, right? So you can say that, well, my finance function is more efficient, or my HR function is more efficient. Or you can say, no, if I'm in a say an automotive industry, my conversion process is going to be more eco-friendly, and I'm going to use more EV vehicles as opposed to an IC powertrain, right? So so you look at a peer group of organizations, use a standard reporting disclosure norm, and then you can figure out and compare and benchmark that where you are doing better or you are not doing so well and you need to do a catch up. And then it becomes more like whether you are a step ahead in the game or not. Like, so these are multiple aspects of the data. I mean, I took a slightly longer, thing
helped a lot.
to explain, but this is how data becomes an integral part of how you are dovetailing that in terms of your ESG strategy.
No, I think extremely interesting point. Especially you need to define what does emission mean, each one of them, and the other aspects of data that you mentioned. Nitish, would you want to add on to it? Is your part of consulting equally data intensive?
So I think just for the group, if I were to zoom out, I know we get into a lot of these details, but as I always say, and I think it's a great reminder as to why we are here, right? Climate change and social inequity are the biggest challenges faced by humanity at the moment, right? By far, right? I would like to argue, and I think we should have a little bit of a debate so that you guys understand what this climate change debate is all about. Because, a lot of time we use a lot of alphabet. It's an alphabet soup, right? I think a lot of people talked about there are 600 languages on sustainability. There are 600 rating agencies out in the globe, measuring different things. But the heart of it is climate change, right? Our world, UN said, you may have, I'm sure all of you well read, we are in an era of global boiling. We are not in an era of global warming. What that means, essentially, if you were to look at 20,000 scientists who have been researching this for last 3 decades, I would say, right? Last 30 years since most of us have been following, and I'm sure many of the scientists have been following that way longer, that the world is heating up because of fossil fuel burning, right? Because of diesel, because of coal, all the fossil fuels, the dead fuels that we are taking out from the planet, right? And we are burning that is producing carbon. At the moment, we are at 1.2 degree of heating. If we were to take baseline of pre-industrial level, right? So we are talking about from 1800, mid-1800, from the time that we started to measure this, right? So it's been measured for hundreds of years. Essentially put, if you were to look at the global compass, we are at 1.2 degrees Celsius of global warming because of industrial stage. And we have all, gained huge advantage. We are a producer of industrial revolution in a way. But these 20,000 scientists who come together every year in this forum that all of you would know called COP, right? Committees of parties, 200 nations come together every year, right? To take stock. And what they are saying is that if we were to cross 2 degrees Celsius, right? Let's say they are saying 1.5, 2 degrees Celsius, we are in uncharted territories, right? What that means, you're starting to see the impact of climate change everywhere. We all know what happened with Pakistan is not going to stay with Pakistan. They were ravaged by floods. Billions of dollars were impacted. 1,500 people died. One simple example last year, it's a great example of how geopolitics and climate change came together. When the Ukraine war started, India said, we will fill up the wheat deficit, right? And we will export to the world. 3 weeks later, the government came back and said, no, we're not going to export. You know what happened? A heat wave had hit India and our wheat production got impacted, right? Now it's that serious, as an example I'm saying. So now if you were to see the impact of this climate change, heat waves, I mean, we all know heat waves, we all seeing the impact of heat waves. Some would say Europe is more impacted. India, we all see that year on year. The impact of floods, monsoon, right? Monsoon is the biggest, most important contributor. Some would say more than the finance minister. We look up to the monsoon, right? And it's becoming erratic at the moment, right? And if the monsoon was to change, imagine the impacts that's going to happen on our agrarian lands primarily and the jobs. Now, I think that's the point that we have to understand. And at the moment, if you look at all the pledges that everyone has made, and that's why this term, I think if you don't know this term net zero, I would say all of you need to know what is net zero, what is net neutral, I know there are a lot of terms, and I think all of us sitting are probably a part of and guilty of making a lot of terms for last 20 years, which doesn't make it easy for all of us. But we need to understand the basic science. You don't have to become a climate scientist. But I think if we don't understand the science, then we will not know. And I think the biggest precursor, I always say, was COVID. COVID, unless proven, was an environmental natural biodiversity issue, right? Caused by bats. As we know, unless proven otherwise. Because of that, people who did the least suffered the most. Who suffered? The poor suffered the most, right? And that's going to happen with climate change. So that's the social side of it. Governance. We all know people who should have governed us well. And I think the best examples are in the US and the European countries where someone said, I will not get vaccinated, I will not wear a mask. And that's going to happen. So imagine if COVID was a trailer to what's going to follow in the world. You know the impact and mayhem that's going to be causing. So we don't, I'm not trying to scare you, but it is very, very scary in terms of how things are going to be unpredictable. And at the moment, coming to that 2 degrees Celsius, with all the commitments, as I said, we are not going to meet 2 degrees Celsius. We right now at about 2.4, 2.5 degree. There will be a COP. If you guys do follow the COP. Every year, 200 nations come together. We will meet in Dubai again. And that's why I think back to Sudipta and all the panelists, esteemed panelists made the point. Data becomes very, very important, right? Because data, in my view, has to be the telescope and the microscope, right? It has to tell us where we are, why we have come here, and has to tell us where we are heading, which is the point that we call it science-based, right? Because there are a lot of controversy theories moving around. I think it's absolutely clear that climate is because of fossil fuel and human activity. And if we don't arrest it very, very quickly, we just have, I would say, 7 years. By 2030, if our emissions, Sudipta took that point, if we can't bring them by 50%, we are in uncharted territory. And the problem is, and I think just to bring this to life for India, we need 9x more power. We are a growing country, right? We have just started our country, our economy. Many people argue that 3/4 of the country, 60-70% of the country is still to be built. We need cement, right? Sudipta talked about, we need power. And that's where this debate on just transition, right? Because this carbon budget is global, right? It doesn't see the territory. You emit carbon, it goes in the atmosphere. Atmosphere is what? It's 6 to 7 kilometers from here till the shield, the blue shield that we call about. And we are burning that carbon. It's like, I don't know if you know, the scientists have been saying Hiroshima bomb, right? The atomic bomb that blasted many years ago. We are emitting emissions as 600,000, 6 lakh atomic bomb, being released on this planet every day. That's the amount of energy that we are emitting. And I think that's causing this issue. And that's why this term, and a lot of time, at least my view is this sustainability, ESG, we get lost. But the heart of it is climate change and any career that you go, right? Most of you are sitting here looking at whichever the best career. Like when we started, we said private equity is the best career, investment banking is the best career, consulting is the best career. Any career that you go, the need for this knowledge, applying that knowledge to whatever you do is very, very critical, backed by data with all the panelists that we talked about. And I think if any of you are thinking that your job is not going to be impacted and in you thinking you'll be able to differentiate without understanding this concept of climate change, I think you will struggle. You will struggle. And I think that's why this is as important. And in my view, there are only 2 mega trends which are coming. One is climate change. The other, many people argue, is Gen AI, artificial intelligence, right? Both of them going to disrupt the way we have seen the world. And I think, in my view, it's a very optimistic note. If we understand this, right? Because many people would argue that sustainability has been in our culture. All of you sitting here in this country, it comes naturally to us, right? I think if we take this as an advantage and run with this and show it to the globe, there's a huge, huge opportunity for everyone to differentiate in your career. The best ESG consultants, I will tell you, are needed, and my co-panelist knows this very well, are needed in banking, are needed in investment banking, are needed in private equity, and are needed in the best tech firms, because everyone has to understand and overlay this sustainability, climate, ESG data model by different standards. So I would say it is very, very important, no matter what career you're planning to think. If you can't over this language, that's my only 2 cents to is that it is very, very critical for you to learn and understand this science behind it. You don't have to be a data scientist or a climate scientist, but basic understanding is very, very critical. And truth be told, and I'll not mince word, we are not in a great stage. The world is trending in a very, very bad phase at the moment because emissions are still rising. emissions are still rising. I've been doing this 20 years. We've been making net zero plan. There's a lot of talk, action starting to happen, but it's not happening. And it's about geopolitics. It's about just transition. It's about social equity. A lot has been added into it. But that's my 2 cents. And the importance of data, back to the point, sir, that you asked, is I can't emphasize much because eventually it has to be science-based and be able to have both monitoring as well as be able to know where we are going. So I think that's my just 2 cents to addition.
Thanks. It's really fascinating. So, Meghna, I guess we learned that you've had a reasonable exposure to public sector. You've been working in public sector firms and departments for quite some time. So, how do you see this sensitivity of in the public sector towards ESG related? And I would rather cover besides environment, but also social as well as governance related aspects. Has it changed over the years, and what are the trends there?
Sure. So I don't know if a lot of us know, India is responsible for practically everything the world's largest. We have the world's largest vaccination program. Can anyone tell me what the world's largest vaccination program is? Anybody else? Apart from polio? Small what? Smallpox. Anybody else? COVID. Anybody else? Malaria. Okay, so now we're just listing diseases. So, so the world's largest vaccination program is not polio. It's not COVID India. The world's largest vaccination program is not even COVID China, if you were wanting to say that. The world's largest vaccination program is for livestock in India. 530 million livestock, which is half the human population of India, to be vaccinated twice a year, every year, for the next 8 years. Started in 2019 by Mr. Modi in a program called National Animal Disease Control Program. Long before COVID hit, well, 7 months before COVID hit, lakhs of vaccinators trained and sent across the country, all 36 states and union territories involved in it. An app made by National Dairy Development Board and Infosys. All of these lakhs of vaccinators that were sent across the country armed with devices. And then in my previous role in Ernst & Young, we were responsible for helping them project management. This was our consultancy assignment to the Ministry of Animal Husbandry, help them run this humongous program. And we said, if you're there, and I'll come to the point of traceability that you made, if you're there, why don't you use this opportunity to also tag the animals? So now crores of tags are being sent across the country in a massive supply chain. The supply chain was so efficient that 7 months later, the Ministry of Health reached out to the Ministry of Animal Husbandry saying, tum logo ne run kiya tha na, now we need to run it for humans because we need to provide COVID vaccines, right in the midst of 2020. The point I'm trying to make is, and when we did all this, we were doing this so that there's traceability, because now we are sitting on a unique identifier for each livestock, and you put that along with the farmer's Aadhaar, the farmer's mobile number, and the farmer's bank account, and you're sitting on Pashu Aadhaar. And now you start putting data on it, which is the agroecological information, the meat, milk, wool productivity, and you're sitting on a livestock stack. A lot of you would have heard about the Aadhaar stack, India stack, health stack. We have something called the livestock stack. And why am I talking about all this? Because this is needed, because even though India is the world's largest producer of milk, it hasn't been able to export a single drop of milk. That's because our client countries tell us, like those in New Zealand, Australia, European countries, Middle East, saying that we don't trust your products because you have a lot of these diseases. And why is that? Because the entire supply chain, the entire set of processes that is followed by the animal husbandry industry, the fisheries industry, the agriculture industry is rife with unsustainable practices, which leads to diseases, which leads to, while on one hand it leads to a biodiversity disaster like what Nitesh said, COVID, on the other hand, it actually impacts the livelihoods of most of us. And yeah, and in terms of career, I want to keep coming back to this because this is something that I had a word with the panelists and also with professor that I want to keep, we should keep, because this is not an industry forum. We need to keep coming back to careers. What is it in it for you? I mean, everything that we are saying, आप लोग Google करके देख सकते हो. You'll probably know a lot more than Sudipta and Nitesh, Aditya and Shankar put together. But in terms of careers, and I could see, I don't know if you could see, because ये वाला सारा ज्ञान मुझे flight पे मिल गया था with Nitesh. So this guy is so passionate about it. He was sitting at the edge of his chair while he was talking to, and rightly so, you did get a applause. If you're passionate about anything, if you're passionate about gender issues, you have a career in sustainability. If you're passionate about fintech, you have a career in sustainability. If you're passionate about just consulting, you have a career in sustainability. I'm passionate about consulting. Have been doing that for the past 18 years. So in terms of careers, whatever bent of mind that you have, if you're passionate about data or reporting, like Sudipta says, you have a career in sustainability. It's not about emissions. It's not about ESG. It's not about बहुत सारा धुआं हो रहा है. It's about what you're passionate about. Like Nitesh said, it's just affecting every aspect of our life, and not just the aspects that private sector firms get involved in. The aspects like and Nitesh mentioned this, that we have sustainability in our nature. While I kind of agree with it, but also disagree with it, because I'm sorry, I'm taking too long.
Go ahead.
There was this project called the world's largest organic crops project. It's called Mission Organic Value Chain Development Northeast Region. While most of us in the mainland of India, the farmers and the agriculturalists and even food supply chain firms like ITC, etc., have been using fertilizers and pesticides for so many decades, it's rendered vast tracts of our land unusable. You can just now grow the same crop over and over again, which what it means is, जो आप Zomato and Swiggy से जो आप अलग-अलग तरह के oats order करते हो, you won't be able to do that. You can't do that. And that's why it's expensive. Why is it expensive? Why is it that imported करके मंगाना पड़ता है करके? That's because even though we have large tracts of land, we are not, so I disagree with Nitesh. Sustainability नहीं है हमारे nature में. We use very unsustainable practices. But the northeastern states, they've been cut off from the mainland for so long that they've just been using their traditional methods. They never got their hands on the fertilizers and the pesticides. So the Indian government started this thing saying that, hey, if Meghna and Sudipta are so okay with going to a department store and asking for 200 and going and being ready to pay 200 rupees more for something that is just labeled organic, why isn't it making its way all the way to the farmer? That's because farmers don't know about organic practices, so less of them do that. And in between, we have the food supply chain firms who get all the benefits out of it. So the government started this entire project saying that, listen, I'm going to help you export. I'm going to make the product a green product. जैसे ही green product करोगे ना, तुमको ज़्यादा value मिलेगा. And that's how they started incentivizing farmers to use more sustainable practices. So that's a perspective I wanted to share.
Thanks. Thanks a lot. So, quick, question to, in fact, all the panelists. It's about including sustainability or, in fact, ESG in the curriculum. So, just to apprise you of the current situation, so we teach, like, for example, I teach supply chain related courses, procurement, etc., and logistics, transportation, other things. So wherever possible in different courses, we touch upon these topics. Besides that, we also have a course on corporate governance and other things. Now, since you guys are into this industry, where do you think we can add more value to our students by including certain topics, or which are the areas where we can strengthen our curriculum to make our students more aware and also more capable of managing ESG-related issues in their careers? So it's basically your advice to the faculty group.
I would say that most of the traditional subjects, for example, digital operations, supply chain, strategy, look at each of these, and I'll give you some specific examples. Say, look at strategy. All of us study strategy as a subject. I would say that no strategy of an organization is going to be even relevant without looking at the sustainability, the ESG, the emissions, the social aspects and the governance aspect of it. And hence, you don't have to change the name of the course. All we have to do is to just introduce the elements of environment in strategy. Let us look at supply chain. Supply chain, we study, say, how we are going to do a network optimization of the supply chain. Network optimization in a very simple way means that how am I going to minimize my distribution cost and how am I going to maximize my OTIF, which is on time in full, right? And also I reduce my working capital and all that. Nowhere in the equation comes the CO2. Nowhere in the equation comes the circularity. Nowhere in the equation comes how am I going to reduce wastage of precious resources like land and water. So in the same supply chain network optimization course, if you bring in these variables into the mainstream, the course curriculum, you have suddenly made that course so very relevant in the current times, right? And even if you look at, say, digital operations, we are talking about Industry 4.0, we are talking about connected machines, we are talking about IoT, and we are talking about all of that, right? If you bring in the fact that how do I ensure that I have the right measurement in place for CO2, right measurement in place for figuring out what is my energy usage at every unit level, and then I'm going to do that optimization or planning accordingly. You are going to, even if you look at finance, we have courses in finance. I mean, I've studied many courses in finance. There, carbon accounting could be a very important aspect. The non-financial planning could be a very important aspect. I mean, we are not saying that we are going to change the finance management course, but if you just bring in these aspects. So my hypothesis is that there is not even a single course where you cannot introduce aspects of sustainability, CO2, emission, equity, and all of those things which we spoke about. And if we just introduce that, we don't have to create a new course like sustainability. We can just embed sustainability in every course.
Yeah. Feel free, please.
I think Sudipta stole the thunder. I think he said it right. Sustainability is everywhere, right? It's everyone's business. It's in every aspect. And I think, just to, add on to what Sudipta said, ultimately what we want to be doing is that we need to obviously understand the business sector, right? The business knowledge. That's very, very important. We are trying to infuse that with this climate change, let me say that, right, as a domain, because sustainability is a very fuzzy word. What is sustainable? In my view, ultimately, heart of it is social and environment, right? The climate change part of it. And then I think infusing digital and data, right? I think if we can achieve the three, it's brilliant. I think eventually that's what we're trying to do. So any course that we are doing, sir, to your point, and everyone is, and that's what companies are asking, right? Saying, look, do you understand the business? Do you understand sustainability as a domain? What's causing, what is plus, what is negative because of climate change? What are the strategic decisions I need to be taking? And can I infuse technology and data, right? So I interpret it. I think that's the most important at a basic. Sudipta said it. I think like accounting, carbon accounting, I think everyone needs to know that. If you don't know carbon accounting tomorrow, just like if you can't read a balance sheet in P&L, you are ill-equipped for whatever job. That's what carbon would be. A lot of people would argue water is the same way, right? And I think IFRS said it for some of you are accounting professionals. And accounting is a base subject, I'm assuming everyone studies. We have not been counting for what really counts, right? So which is carbon, which is water, which is circularity. I think social is the big domain. We are trying to understand diversity, equity, inclusion. I think those are a little bit, fuzzy topics. How do we measure? But I think it's getting there towards harmonization. So to your point, I think if we can infuse that in everything that we do, will be easier. Apart from obviously certain basic sustainability, climate change related overview, I think that will be very, very useful. And I think every B school, we are seeing that. I mean, US, some of you may have seen Stanford. I mean, it's been a school for many years. one of the investors donated $1 billion, and they have the first climate change school that they just opened as an example. It's fully driven towards climate change. Columbia School have been doing that for many years, and there are many others, right? And I think we may also be doing that in our curriculum, but maybe it's just not structured. But I think it's very, very important so that everyone has the confidence to talk, understand, and then obviously not be part of the greenwashing also, right? Because a lot of that also entails people saying this is green, this is that. Your money, where is your money going, right? You will see a lot of funds will say, and I think both of the gentlemen talked about sustainable fund, right? What is sustainable fund? What is ESG fund? So I think whether you're buying a product, whether you are investing money, I think point was made, whether you are going to an organization, how do you assess how strong they are? So, and all of that I think is very, very equipped to differentiate your value and be in the right place at the right time. So that's
Thanks.
I don't know. Thanks. So, just my 2 cents on this. As in, obviously, what both the gentlemen said is very true. Just what I want to add is there's a theory of core competency. So, not everyone can become an ESG scientist. Not everyone can. There are PhDs, people doing PhDs in environment science. There are people doing PhD in governance and so on. So, let them do what they're doing. More to the point, what Nitesh said is, you keep doing what you're doing. If you're interested in finance, go into finance. If you're interested in marketing, do that. If you're interested in consultancy, do that. But the point is that you have to be aware of these factors as well, because whether you like it or not, whether, there are subjects, for example, some people are averse to finance and so on. But everyone has to do it. Once you get to a position in your role, even if you're a brand manager, you have to look at the numbers, whether you like it or not. No one would have thought while, when you're young and you're just in your MBA, you say that I hate finance, so I'm just going to take marketing. But 5 years down the line, you have to look at the P&L of your segment. You have to look at the P&L of your vertical. You have to, if you have to grow in the organization, you have to know finance. In the same way, if you want to have a successful career, you have to think on these terms as well. But that doesn't mean everyone becomes an ESG consultant or everyone becomes an ESG practitioner. Whatever you feel passionate about, you keep doing that. But these lenses have to be added to that course. So that there need not be a separate ESG course. There are institutes and there are people who are focused purely on that, scientists and so on. But what you need to be aware of, I can't sum it up better than what he did, but in every aspect of your professional life, you have to make sure this is an added lens towards it. That's all. That's all I would like to say.
I think I'm the most unfit person to advise what should be included in the course. I'm a physics student, and what I do professionally is a mistake, and I have a very big regret about leaving physics. I think physics does a nice thing. It teaches you maths, and once if you can read maths, you can practically read everything else. I have found management very funny as a concept. It makes you run into a rat race. Everybody has to suddenly wear a coat. And somewhere, yeah, I'm worrying. I don't know why, but somewhere if you take one step back, and this is my deep I have a kid of your age. He's 24 years. He is doing his articles with Sudipto's firm actually, and I observe my kids and my friends, even most of my colleagues in my office, they are your age, 24, 25, 26. Average age of the company is 27, and I am exactly.
You don't look that old.
Yeah,
I must say, absolutely.
Yeah, so
Maybe the jacket.
maybe, yeah. So I will tell you what I have found missing in these courses, and this is not about your course because I think it's a very respectable institute, and my comment should not be misinterpreted as it's a comment on this organization. But I think in the early days in school we studied these Aesop's fables, and it gave us the basic understanding of, you cannot steal, you cannot do this, that, and we slowly we started taking it for granted. In fact, 25 years back in my previous organization, when we were doing an exercise to decide the values of the company, and somebody proposed integrity, and the CEO told, integrity is given. Is integrity really given? Is it really given? Why do we find so many failures? Because greenwashing, you know, what kind of, is it a failure of ESG, or is it a failure of the basic moral values and standards? So I think what I would like to see more, I don't know if I'm asking for too much, but I think taking a step back from this mad rush into career building and, beating everybody else to the podium and all that, and trying to introduce this element of deciding what is right and what is wrong. Your education will be complete if you can decide that this is right and this is wrong. And you have, out of the 1,000 indicators that we look at, say for example, gender issues. We take interviews and we ask about a few comments about, everybody says the right things during the interviews. But when you look at how they treat women, when you look at how they, how open are they to hire a woman in a sales team, for example, you actually see all these deep rooted biases coming out, and it's not very easy to do that. I think a course curriculum, any course curriculum, even if it is a physics MSc, it is only complete if the person who gets that degree is able to decide what is right and what is wrong.
Thanks, I think it's a very deep statement you have made. Thanks. Any other comments? All right. So thanks. I think we've just crossed the time limit. What we can probably do with a couple of audience questions. So please go ahead. Yeah, there at the back, please. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you, panelists, for your great insights. My name is Bhavya, and I have two questions. So we talked about sustainability today. So what are few key matrices and KPIs that the organization should include in their reporting process? Also, how organizations can ensure the transparency and accuracy during their reporting process?
So there are three categories of KPIs. The first category is the environmental category. In that category, you are talking again about 2-3 aspects. The first aspect is about your emissions. And in emissions, you are talking about all the 3 types of emissions: scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Apart from emissions, you also talk about the greening initiatives of your sources of consumption of energy, right? The third aspect is around the circularity of the supply chain. For example, if you are a plastic manufacturing organization, how much of that has been recycled? If you are a metals manufacturing, do you have a scrap recycling technology available to you? So your recycling of or circularity of the supply chain. Fourth aspect is treatment of effluents and wastes. Typically for industries like textiles or chemicals, which come up with a huge amount of waste, which is detrimental to the environment, right? Or even organizations which use a huge amount of water, for that matter, and that can deplete the water table from wherever they have set up their plants. So how do they ensure that the water is used in a sustainable, recyclable manner? So these are 4 or 5 aspects from the E perspective. From the S perspective, you have got matrices around primarily around equity. How do you make your organization more equitable, open, inclusive? And that is one aspect. The other aspect is that if you are sourcing some materials from suppliers, are your suppliers also following the same standards? For example, if I'm sourcing, say, cotton or coffee or any of the commodities, Are these being produced from places which do not employ child labor, or are these being sourced from places which do not, which are giving at least the minimum wages to their employees, right? So you are looking about equality and inclusion within your organization. You're also looking for equality and inclusion outside your organization, but within your ecosystem, right? So that is the social aspect of it. And then the G, which is the governance, and governance is all encompassing, which is all around ensuring that you have the right checks and balances, right controls in place, right level of oversight from a board perspective, right levels of disclosure, right levels of veracity of information which is being given at all points in time. So those are the aspects from a G perspective. So you combine all the three, then you have got a fairly comprehensive set of matrices you can work with. Your second question was on the how do you...
How organizations can ensure accuracy and transparency in their reporting.
Right. So I say that we should use technology in a very big way. Get out of the manual processes, get out of Excel spreadsheets, use technology for capturing the data at source, use technology for consistently transforming the data in a organization-wide standard manner so that there is no room for interpretation or even challenging the data. And the third is use technology for not just reporting or disclosing, but also for looking at the forward-looking view of what you're going to do in the future as well. So you use technology on all these three aspects: capture, transformation, reporting, and analytics, and make it very, very clear and transparent. Link that with the KPIs of the people at the right places, and that is how you are going to drive it in terms of how part of it.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Ashima Jain, and my question is, how do organizations strike a balance between their short-term financial goals and their long-term sustainability objectives? And also, what strategies do they implement to operationalize their sustainability practices?
So Ashima, that's a very good question because there is always debate between short term and long term, and one would argue sustainability is all about long term, right? But the challenge is you have to keep an eye on short term and mid term, right? Otherwise, you'll not last for long term, right? So it's a balancing act, I would say. I think all leading organizations want to look at from a long term standpoint, and I think that's why all of these KPIs Sudipta very articulately talked about are very, very critical, because eventually there has been a lot of research on these KPIs saying they will create long-term value, right? So take a point, case in point. What are we talking, right? If we were to zoom out, we are saying any organization, have you done a climate risk assessment to say, जब बाढ़ आएगी, heat wave आएगी, ports आपके पानी में डूब जाएंगे because water is going to rise. All the 20,000 scientists that have been saying, have you thought of your capex allocation well, right? So you don't want to put a unit in an area which is water stressed, right? So Dipta's point, right? Or you don't want to, have a lot of trade routes in a port which will be underwater, give and take in 20 years, right? You can't really operate. So I think those are the things that we are saying, and I think it's very, very critical for an organization. Similarly, I think the other thing that we're talking about is that every leading organization needs to have a net zero journey, right? I'm simply put, organization have to reduce their emissions so that they're not contributing to climate change because give and take, whether we like it or not, a tax on carbon or a tax on pollution, let me put it this way, is coming, right? So if organization has been very, very polluting, they will not be liked by investors. They will have a huge financial disincentive. Their P&L balance sheet will go down. And to say the least, the finance, right, which is the bigger thing that we have not talked about, going forward, the cost of capital will be linked to sustainability measures, right? So if I am not sustainable and I draw a loan, my interest rate is going to be higher, or I may not even get it in the future, some may argue. So I think it's that critical. But once the board and people get it, they understand that they need to do things now, because we all know to drive these things is not easy. Right? To drive diversity in an organization is not easy. It's very, very hard. It takes a lot of practices, time, culture to do it. And I think that's why it's important. So you need to start now, but the wheel will start to turn later. You can't have immediate points. And I think all the points, my co-panelists have talked about. But so I think all leading organization, I think the board that we work with, they understand. And our job, I think, and all of your jobs would be to make them understand, right? Because a lot of people still think, I'll be honest, and I'll say this, it's CSR, it's corporate social responsibility. 2% मैं अपना profit का देता हूं, and that's about it, right? I'm doing my bit. And it's very poorly understood. At max, people will say, is EHS, traditionally, most of you are in the manufacturing space, they'll say environmental health and safety. Now, what's the pivot from EHS to ESG as we are talking about, right? Climate, we have not really factored that. And I think that's what's important. But anyone, I'm sure a basic person understands that. I think they start dialing that in very quickly. But if they're not understanding this, then I think obviously they are taking decisions which will hurt them very, very badly in the long run, I mean, to say the least.
I do not see any dichotomy between short and long term, right? So if you do an analysis, you will find out that organizations which are more sustainable today also have a higher stock market, appreciation. They're also more profitable. They're also more, they're able to sustain the right talent. So I do not see that the short term contradicts the long term. And we have to understand that mindset first. It is very fashionable for us to say trade-off. I do not see any trade-off. I see short-term is something which is very important, which is also going to completely dovetail with the long-term.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think we'll just take one more question, last one.
Yeah, hi all. I'm Pratyasha Ranjay. Sudipta sir, there's a question for you. So you mentioned that there are companies who are using ESG principles as an opportunity rather than just having it as a regulatory compliance. So I want to understand how can we motivate such companies, like all the companies, to integrate ESG principles in their value chain instead of just treating them as a regulatory compliance.
I'll give you multiple examples. I was talking to a CEO of a glass manufacturing organization, right? And what he told me was that because there is a huge amount of focus on making green buildings, they are diversifying away from their traditional ways of constructing to making glass as an integral part of the structure of the building. And for him, at least for his organization, ESG was an opportunity and not a cost, right? I'll take one more example. When we talk about the effluent control or the circularity, we are effectively talking about reducing the cost of the organization also. For example, if you are just able to recycle the waste and you are able to have that technology which allows you to convert at a much lower energy consumption from, say, a scrap metal to a finished good, you are effectively reducing your conversion cost. Of course, you are saving the environment and all that, but it is also making you more efficient. So I gave you two examples. One was you are able to increase your sales because you are innovating, taking help of the changing requirements and sentiments of your customer. And the second example is that you're using this as a pivot to increase your operational efficiency on an immediate basis. So it is like this, that it should not be looked at as a compliance burden. It should absolutely be looked at as an opportunity. And that is what most of the leading organizations who are leaders in their space or who are a little visionary are looking at ESG as a way to differentiate themselves from the pack, a way to make their value more long-term and sustainable in the eyes of the investors.
Thank you, sir. So, last question to all the panelists. Sir, for a budding sustainability consulting like career, suppose I am going to choose, what all skills should I have to move into the field of sustainability as a consultant?
Yeah, I mean, I can I'll start. It's a very, very good question. At the heart of it, I think you need to be very good in communication. I must say that, right? Because if you can't articulate what you're doing, what you're not doing, why is it important, debate is a very important skill in this career. Let me say that, right? So let me not say communication, but debating skills, because they are both sides of it. It's a very complex debate. It's an emerging debate. So communication or debate is, I would say, is the most important skill. The second is, I think both the gentlemen sitting here and Sudipta and everyone talked about ability to interpret data, which today is a life skill anywhere that you go. I think any career that you choose, if you're not comfortable with technology and data interpretation and what is the story the data telling us, I think then obviously we will be lost at it. And I think in sustainability, it's very, very important. So I would say these are the two things, apart from, I'm not getting into technicality, but as a life skill, which I think every career you would need, but more in sustainability for sure. But.
Yeah, I think the ability to look at the larger picture, I think that's going to be very important. The more you get out, it's important. You need to understand data. You need to be able to make sense of the data, but you also need to have the ability to zoom out. Like Sudipta said, it's not just like that glass manufacturer. They thought of it as an opportunity and they changed their entire processes. The way they turned around their company and now came up with a new revenue stream. So the ability to zoom out and look at the larger picture, I think, is important in this debate.
I would say 3 C's. First C is clarity of thought. You need to be clear what you're doing, why you are doing it. Second is about being curious. Because if you are curious, you will learn and you will learn fast. And this is a changing field, so nothing is sacrosanct. We are all learning as we are practicing this craft. And the third thing is collaboration. Because it encompasses multiple different disciplines, you have to work with diverse teams and diverse skills and be comfortable with that kind of a setup. So if you have the right clarity, if you are curious, if you are naturally collaborative, I think ESG is the right career for you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thanks so much. I think you had a great conversation, and not only the students, but all of us ended up learning quite a bit from all of you. So thank you very much.
So now we'll have a short video from Mr. Nitesh Mehrotra.
So I don't know if you have 5 minutes. It's a video I just wanted to play. We curated a couple of videos for you, but this one is from COP. COP is the one that I talked about. Conference of Parties. It's unprecedented. Every year, 200 countries come together. If you don't know this term, COP, it has been going on for last 30 years. You should know. And I just wanted to play. Hopefully, all of you know this gentleman. If you don't, then you've really missed out on a lot of curious, fun facts about nature. Sir David Attenborough. He has brought many, many series, and he's one of the most important advocates. There are many advocates on climate change and why this is important. He gave this opening speech at COP. This is a COP 26 2 years ago in Glasgow. COP 28 will be in Dubai this year. So you must dial in. But it's I've truncated it. It's a 4-minute or a 5-minute video. I just wanted to play that. Hopefully it'll give you a glimpse of all that we talked about as to why this is important. And this was given to all the world leaders from the Glasgow stage. So have a look at it, if you can play that with good audio.
It's easy to forget that ultimately the emergency climate comes down to a single number: the concentration of carbon in our atmosphere. The measure that greatly determines global temperature. And the changes in that one number is the clearest way to chart our own story, for it defines our relationship with our world. For much of humanity's ancient history, that number bounced wildly between 180 and 300. And so too did global temperatures. It was a brutal and unpredictable world. At times, our ancestors existed only in tiny numbers. But just over 10,000 years ago, that number suddenly stabilized, and with it, Earth's climate. We found ourselves in an unusually benign period with predictable seasons and reliable weather. For the first time, civilization was possible, and we wasted no time in taking advantage of that. Everything we've achieved in the last 10,000 years was enabled by the stability during this time. The global temperature has not wavered over this period by more than plus or minus 1 degree Celsius. Until now. Our burning of fossil fuels, our destruction of nature, our approach to industry, construction, and learning are releasing carbon into the atmosphere at an unprecedented pace and scale. We are already in trouble. The stability we all depend on is breaking. This story is one of inequality as well as instability. Today, those who've done the least to cause this problem are being the hardest hit. Ultimately, all of us will feel the impact, some of which are now unavoidable. A tale of the smartest species doomed by that all too human characteristic of failing to see the bigger picture in pursuit of short-term goals. Perhaps the fact that the people most affected by climate change are no longer some imagined future generation, but young people alive today. Perhaps that will give us the impetus we need to rewrite our story, to turn this tragedy into a triumph. We are, after all, the greatest problem solvers to have ever existed on Earth. We now understand this problem. We know how to stop the number rising and put it in reverse. We must recapture billions of tons of carbon from the air. We must fix our sights on keeping 1.5 degrees within reach. A new industrial revolution, powered by millions of sustainable innovations, is essential and is indeed already beginning. We will all share in the benefits. Affordable clean energy, healthy air, and enough food to sustain us all. Nature is a key ally. Wherever we restore the wild, it will recapture carbon and help us bring back balance to our planet. And as we work to build a better world, we must acknowledge no nation has completed its development because no advanced nation is yet sustainable. All have a journey still to complete, so that all nations have a good standard of living and a modest footprint. We're going to have to learn together how to achieve this, ensuring none are left behind. We must use this opportunity to create a more equal world. And our motivation should not be fear. If working apart, we are a force powerful enough to destabilize our planet, surely working together, we are powerful enough to save it. In my lifetime, I've witnessed a terrible decline. In yours, you could and should witness a wonderful recovery. That desperate hope, ladies and gentlemen, delegates, excellency, is why the world is looking to you and why you are here.
Thank you all for the valuable insights provided. The key takeaway is that do everything possible and do it passionately. Apart from that, it is indeed very clear The data is the new oil. We had an interesting conversation on the reality of net zero, the dedication of corporations to ESG, the challenges that governments are facing to implement sustainability practices, and role of the credit companies for ESG ratings, the adoption of digital technologies, and transformation necessary for sustainable long-term value creation. As we wrap up this enriching session, on behalf of SPJMR and our PGPM batch, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our speakers, the audience, the Samavesh team, and every individual who made this event possible. Your engagement is truly what brings life to Samavesh. Let's carry forward these insights and learnings from today. And as you all know, what we learn with joy, we never forget. I would like to invite my batchmate, Amay Saxena, on stage to give speakers and moderator our token of appreciation. Now I request the entire panel for group photo session. Now I request our esteemed faculties, please join us on stage for the photo session. Please join us on the stage. Now I request the entire consulting conclave team, please come up on the stage for the photo session. Now I request the entire Samavesh team, please come up on the stage. Yeah.